It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey Not the Face with your host John Nash and your producer me, Steffi Haynes. And today we are going to talk about Rousey versus Carano just a little bit more. We're going to take a look at some news about DAZN and Matchroom. We're going to talk about Eddie Hearn and Dana White's little feud going back and forth. We're going to look at Zuffa Boxing and WBC. We're even going to talk a little tiny bit about Sean Strickland. But before we get into all that, I would recommend that you pick up a paid subscription so that you have access to all of our content, because we will be putting some of this behind a paywall. Now, John, I have been getting comments about how people enjoy listening to us riff on movies and that they would love if we did separate episodes about movies. So I told you.
Yeah, well, two people have said something, I think.
It's been four, actually. I went
four.
Yep.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just
those are the people that commented. That's not saying that those are the only people that listened.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always up to talk movies and stuff, so I can do that. But I just don't know if it's, we definitely have to do it on separate episodes from the show. I don't know the people they're coming here for combat sports content. I don't know if they want to hear us rattle on about movies, unless maybe it was combat sports movies.
Yeah, I saw a new one called Beast is coming out with Russell Crowe. Did you see that?
Oh, for fuck's sake!
Oh,
God.
Yeah, there's a new movie.
Yeah, it's an MMA movies. Mixed martial arts movies are probably some of the worst. That's the worst genre of we got to go back. I mean, especially compared to boxing, because in boxing you got obviously Raging Bull, you got the setup, you got The Harder They Fall, you got Fat City. You can just go down the list.
The Great White Hope.
The Great White Hope. You got The Great White Hype is the comedic version. You got Requiem for a Heavyweight. You got, Champion, Body and Soul, just endless amount. You probably go 20, 30 deep in boxing before you get your first MMA.
I mean,
mixed martial
we didn't
arts.
even mention Rocky.
Yeah, I mean, Rocky's a pretty good movie. Just I don't put it in the top of the best boxing movies, but that shows you how deep the boxing genre is.
Indeed.
So yeah,
MMA movies kind of suck.
Yeah, I mean, I worked on one called No Rules, which might be singularly the worst movie ever made about MMA, which is saying a lot.
So I guess we should move on, because I can tell that we are already devolving. We're spiraling the drain here with the MMA movie talk. It's a far cry from talking about Taxi Driver or Apocalypse Now or anything like that. But I will say that my husband and I watched The Godfather last night. It was probably my 10th time, but it was Eric's very first time watching it, and I was so jealous that he had that experience.
No way. I'm shocked that he hadn't seen it before.
Yep. He had never seen it, so he loved it. I'm going to show him part 2, and then I'm going to stop there. That's going to be the end of it.
I mean, it is. The Godfather is a perfect movie. It's pretty hard to. No notes.
No notes. None. It was phenomenal for him. He really, really enjoyed it. So, anyways, let's get started. And just like we always do, we're going to start by asking if there are any UFC antitrust updates.
Nope, none this time. So since we last spoke, there has been no new filings, nothing to report. I guess I just will highlight that March 3rd is the next status conference. So we should get some answers about the spoliation deadline that the judge said. We should get some answers about dominance MMA and also what's going on in Iridium. And I'm sure we'll have filings before March 3rd. But as of right now, when I last checked, just minutes before we recorded, whatever night this is, Thursday night, I did not see anything showing up on Pacer that was filed with the court. So we have really no updates there.
Except for when Ali Abdelaziz comes to your page and says, you mentioned Dominance MMA and you didn't mention me.
I didn't tag him. I'll remember to tag him in the future.
Now, let's move on, because there has been some discussion on social media that Rousey versus Carano is not really that big a fight, or would not have been a big fight in the past, that Rousey versus Cyborg was really the one that people wanted. Do you agree with this?
I mean, there's some truth to that. There's some truth because I remember back then, I think this boils down to what the two different types of fights we're talking about here, and also kind of what the future of big fights might be. Because there is a difference in a fight that will draw the maximum amount of curious casuals, people that just want to tune in to see it. Basically the Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson fight, where they're kind of intrigued that this is going on. They know, people that just barely know combat sports will tune in, and you'll get a massive audience. That's one type of fight. And the other type of fight is where the hardcores are desperate to see it. And these are people that are willing to pay 80, 70, 60, 75, 85, $100 for, when it was Mayweather versus Pacquiao, that, they're willing to dish out a lot of their own money to see this. And you go back in past, we had this when people would pay to go to the closed circuit, that shows how much people wanted to see a fight. They wouldn't put it on broadcast TV. They'd put it on closed circuit, and you had to actually buy a ticket like you're going to a movie theater and sit in a shitty arena to watch it projected. And that's really two different types of fights. And one is usually driven more by people in the know, hardcore fans. It doesn't mean it can't escape and become a big fight. We've had them in MMA where there's fights that have been big. Khabib versus McGregor in many ways kind of fit that. And we've had, obviously in boxing, there's fights that escaped it. Canelo versus Mayweather versus De La Hoya, we have a bunch of Mayweather fights where it was driven in many ways by the fan base who wanted to see what they thought were the best, and then casuals that heard about it because it was talked about so much. So that's one type of fight. And then there's, like I said before, these kind of spectacles that just draw large audiences. And so there's a spectrum. And I think back in the day, if we're talking about in the past, because that was what the discussion was on social media, I think it's pretty clear the Cyborg versus Ronda Rousey fight was bigger with that latter group of fans, the hardcore, the more serious fans, and would have probably a lot of escape velocity into, would escape the circle of the hardcore fans into the general public, and that's what drove it. It would have been a big fight on pay-per-view. But that's not to say, and also I think, Capos had brought this up, that wasn't, the Gina Carano versus Rousey was not the real discussion. There wasn't a lot of clamor. And he's right about that. It was the Cyborg versus Rousey. But I think Carano versus Rousey would have been a huge fight too, because it would have drawn in more of the curious. And what's interesting too about Rousey at that time, when she first started in the UFC, she did pretty good numbers. She did later massive pay-per-view numbers, but in the beginning, pretty good numbers. But her ticket sales were always weak. And I think in large part, that's because she drew in a completely different fan base that probably didn't feel comfortable going to the live events, but were willing to pay, get together, go to bars, whatever, willing to pay to go see it. And so with the Carano fight, you might even get a larger amount of those people. So it would have been big. And we know it's also a big fight, that it would have been a successful fight, because we have text messages from the UFC around that time where they discussed the Carano versus Rousey fight when they were making it. And they said it was a big fight at the time. If we look back the day after Rousey versus McMahon, UFC 170, they get a text message amongst the group that it did 82,000 buys on DirecTV and 56,000 buys on HD. And Dana White had a comment looking back, or someone first texted Dana White, looking back, Cain Velasquez versus JDS, their last pay-per-view version, only did 75,000 on DirecTV. So Rousey was beating the Cain JDS, and then Dana White commented crazy, and she beats Jones too. So we talk about her not being a star. A lot of fans do. Now we know she became her last few fights were huge pay-per-view sellers, but even at that time, they're pointing out she generates more sales than the heavyweight title fight and the light heavyweight champ John Jones do. And so we see she's an attraction. And then later Dana says, I have one more FYI for you. I'm reaching out to Gina Carano. to see if she'd like to fight Ronda. That's a huge, and he capitalized huge, fight. And so the plan was at the time was for the July 4th show in 2014 was Rousey versus Carano would be the main event, and it'd be the co-main event would be the derailed from the drug test Vanderlei Silva versus Chael Sonnen coming off the Ultimate Fighters. That was the big event they're planning. But there's other text messages amongst that chain at that time, again, which we got from Discovery. You go to Pacer, you can find it, where they discussed it, and they discussed why it's a big fight and there's going to be a lot of interest in this. And that you could tell from the text messages compared to other fights, they are much more excited in this, doing research because they're trying to sign Gina. Like, please look up her contract. And then they wanted to pull up Cyborg too. So obviously they were thinking about at the time a potential Cyborg fight in there at some point. But they go through, they want to know how much each is making. So I'm sure they're calculating the profit margins, all that stuff. So you can tell just from the general tone, it would have been a very big fight. So when people say that fight would not have been big in the past, no one cared about it, I think the evidence from the UFC themselves disproves that, because they were very gung-ho about that bout back in the day.
All right. Let's move on. A little bit more on Dana White, because he and Eddie Hearn have been going back and forth about Zuffa Boxing. Zuffa Boxing is the talk of all the landscape right now. Do you have any thoughts on their feud, on anything that Eddie Hearn has said or anything that Dana White has said?
Well, we can almost add Oscar De La Hoya, because
I saw his clapback.
He's been parroting basically the Hearn criticisms, and what both of them basically criticize is the arrogance and the just how cheap it looks, the Zuffa Boxing title. They criticize that, like how could you be so full of yourself to introduce the Zuffa Boxing title? And they also criticize his comments, the Dana White's attack, and Eddie Hearn, that he couldn't even build his own promotion, he needed his dad. And they clap back, both of them shoot back at Dana White that, yeah, but you had your daddy, which either was the Fertitas or Turkey. They kind of ignore, again, that they ignore that Endeavor with Ari Emanuel and all those guys are really the ones financing everything. Everybody kind of ignores them because I guess they're just not glamorous enough. And they also ignore Turki Al-Sheikh is not really the person in Saudi Arabia that's running stuff. There's other people behind him. In fact, his wings seem to have been a little bit clipped financially. Turkey's obviously important, and he was important for the last few years in boxing, but it looks like Sila, the other members of the people running that, are more important to the future going forward. But they're right. Dana White needed that. And I think it doesn't really matter, because in many ways, their criticism of Dana White is that he is not a great promoter. And in some ways, the one thing I think everybody misses is, we've talked about on the show, Dana White is, he's there to be a lightning rod, a lightning rod or a dummy, or to attract arrows, attract attention away from the other members of TKO, because they're all focused on him. They're all focused on what a buffoon he is, ignoring this entity that's behind him. It doesn't matter if Dana White truly is not a great promoter in the traditional boxing sense. He's not matchmaking, he says, right? What huge fights is he putting on? He hasn't done that yet. The events he's put on are kind of minor. None of that matters, because it doesn't matter if Dana White's actually a better promoter than these guys. What matters is the people behind Dana White and the boxing, what they're doing to the economy, the marketplace for boxing, how it's set up, and the advantages it's going to give them. That's all that matters. And I think that's, they're not really addressing that. No one in boxing kind of addresses that. I've seen articles about how, Zuffa can't take over boxing. It's bound to be a failure. And again, I think they miss that it's, traditionally, I think it's pretty clear. I mean, you can make a case that Dana White and Zuffa Boxing, whatever they're doing, cannot compete with the other promoters. They can't put on as good a product. They're not trying. But they don't have to, because I think the goal, as we talked about, as we know, is they're going to amend the Ali Act. They're going to introduce a system of UBO, which they have a direct advantage of. And then the system that they put in place is going to give them advantage over all their promoters, no matter how good they do, because they will be able to lock up fighters in almost a one-way fly trap. It's a black hole. Fighters can get sucked in that they want, and they can't get out. And so they will accrue more and more gravity, more and more mass, which then accrues more and more gravity, pulling in more and more fighters. And that's the part that I think everybody's kind of, missing. So it is entertaining. I mean, I think, the criticisms on Dana are somewhat accurate. His shows are not mind-blowingly great so far. None of that, but he has a $40 billion company behind him. He has the partners in Saudi Arabia that have been financing boxing the last few years. He has a network no one else has. And he has not him specifically, again, he's a figurehead, but the entity he represents has the pull, the connections to get legislation amended, not just the way they want it, but amended to not just clear out so they can do their type of model, but amended in a way that gives their company an advantage over all the other companies. And so I think that's where the other boxing promoters miss the big picture, is that you can be as good as you want and challenge Dana White until you can tackle those other problems, until you can level the playing field, you are in serious trouble.
Indeed. Now, Matchroom and DAZN have announced an extension on their deal. Is this good news for Matchroom?
I guess in the immediate, it's good news. They have a broadcast partner. They have a place going in the future. They can do shows. They have spots for their fighters. They have revenue going to be coming in. But more the medium long term, I don't think it's great news because, everybody knows no one watches DAZN, specifically in the United States. If you're worried about the future of, American boxing and Matchroom USA and their efforts to do something in the United States, I don't see how this is that helpful, because DAZN has very few subscribers, very little attention on the outside. It's basically, we talked about the old ESPN firewall. This is 10, 12, 20 firewalls, because first you have to hear about it, then you have to pay for it, and then you have to see the goddamn price tag of how expensive it is, and then you got to pay again for the next step up to get the pay-per-views. So many hurdles that the audience there is very tiny. And so I think that the other problem with this is I'm not confident in the financial future of DAZN. So Matchroom has tied themselves into a platform no one's heard about and no one subscribes to, and that whose potential financial future is not as secure as you'd hope. That's where I don't think it's probably not the best move. And I would, and if they are actually concerned about Zuffa Boxing and competing with them, well, they've kind of handicapped themselves going forward. Now, the alternative, though, is perhaps there was no alternative. Perhaps this was the only network that was considering offering them a decent deal, in which case they had to take it. But again, they're moving into a place where no one's going to see them, and their competitor, Zuffa Boxing, is on a more stable platform, who's overpaying them because of their UFC connection, and who's going to have a much bigger audience. It's just, you've handicapped yourself. You've tied one arm behind your back before you even got into the fight.
What about for DAZN? Is this a good deal for DAZN?
I don't know about that either. They're financed again. They lose money every year. I do not know where their profitability is going to come from. I guess we'd have to see more recent finances. Maybe they had an uptick in boxing subscribers. Maybe they've had some success in the boxing programming. But my understanding before is they cut back on boxing because it was not converting the audience that they were hoping for. So, so I don't know how it could be that great for them. But again, for them, the alternative is, what is their alternative? There's not a lot of other sports properties they can go for. Most of the big sports do not want to sign with DAZN to begin with, and they also don't have the resources to sign them. So you're kind of stuck with boxing. And so for DAZN, it's a long-term or whatever, I'd say it perhaps is not the best deal for them, but they probably have as few alternatives as Matchroom Boxing had.
The future looks bleak. That's all I got to say there. Zuffa Boxing has revealed their diamond-encrusted octagon belt for boxing. What did you think of it?
Oh, it looks spectacular on Turki Al-Sheikh. really brings out the I don't know. It's stupid as hell. It looks dumb. I am amazed that they went with the name Zuffa Boxing when TKO was right there. They were calling it TKO Boxing. That makes sense. Zuffa Boxing. Could you come up with a dumber name? for years, people have criticized Bellator, how Bellator handicapped themselves by coming up with the name Bellator, that no one wanted to watch Bellator, right?
Mm.
Zuffa Boxing seems to have done the same thing. Like, the one thing they have over Bellator is they have this massive entity behind them and shit tons of money and, all these other things, but they seem to have chosen a god awful name that's, not helpful to them. And then it also reminds you of just how pathetic the idea is that the pitch they're having, that they're going to save boxing by what? Introducing a whole new title. That's their secret to saving boxing, is introducing a whole new title. Forget all the sanctioned organizations. We're just going to introduce our own title until other UBOs spring up and they have their own title. So we're just increasing the number of titles now. And I'm sure fighters have dreamed their whole life to win and hold the Zuffa Boxing title.
Did you find it funny that it is an octagon shape, that it could double for one of the UFC belts, honestly?
Yeah, we talked about it, I think, briefly when we first saw the leaked image. And it makes some sense because the UFC is their biggest brand. They want to tie it to that. And Zuffa Boxing, in many ways, I know there's some big boxing fans that are like really passionate about Zuffa Boxing. Although it is noteworthy, the biggest Zuffa Boxing fans seem to be conservative Donald Trump fans. It's like they've embracing Zuffa Boxing, which probably reinforces the idea that the UFC is MAGA, right wing. That seems to be a signifier of their identity, right? It's part of their partisan identity as being a Zuffa Boxing supporter now. And probably the reverse too. There's probably liberals that hate Zuffa Boxing just because Zuffa's involved. But I think it's more noticeable right now from the right. But there's some, fans that have jumped on it. But Zuffa, I think their major objective right now is not really appealing to the hardcore boxing fan. It's not getting, and the traditional boxing fan is mostly Hispanic and Black, overwhelmingly compared to, maybe not overwhelmingly, but much more proportionally. They're more represented in the boxing audience than their general population. And I don't see them really appealing to them as much. I think it almost feels like they're going out of their way to draw in the TKO entities, the people that might be curious, to the gambling we've talked about before, but also people, I would say, the kind of like the concept of boxing, but don't really watch it. And they're giving them because it does seem noteworthy that they have like every ethnic group lined up in the roster, right? When they do events, we have an Italian, we have a Polish, we have an Irish guy, we have an Irish American and an Irish guy, we have an African American, we have a Mexican port. They have multiple ethnic groups, especially amongst the white boxers. That's almost seems like you're trying to feed people their idea of what they got boxing from Rocky to draw more casuals in. And so I think when you're trying to do that, then maybe having the octagon's important, because those people are probably more familiar with the UFC octagon than boxing itself, besides the concept of it.
I am still of the mind that they don't care if Zuffa Boxing fails or whatever, that with this legislation, it basically gives them control of the final combat sport. They've got wrestling, they've got MMA, now they're going to have boxing, and it doesn't matter if it fails as long as UFC succeeds and keeps making billions of dollars every year. And the other aspect, and you said it right there in your answer, was that they're going to get to control all aspects of combat sports gambling too. So it doesn't really matter, in my opinion. My opinion is formed by, everything you've taught me. And so I look at it like that. And man, I have become such a critic because of the way you've basically taught me.
Don't blame me on that. But I will say, one, I don't believe that. I believe they want Zuffa Boxing to be a success because they're already pitching to investors about the potential $5, $10, $20 billion valuation of it. They see it as a way to increase the valuation of the company. But I have talked to people in the industry that are somewhat convinced that their goal is actually to really hurt boxing, and that the combat sports then would be UFC, that the casual fan would not would not go to, would not be looking for big boxing fans, because when you have big events there, that's where the crossover is. Those are people that are not hardcore. They go, what is the big event everybody's talking about? The goal is to basically remove boxing as a competitor for those casual fans.
Yep.
And then MMA would be more, UFC specifically would be more valuable and would not have would not have to worry about competition of sorts for casual fans from boxing. So I've heard that from several people. I mean, that could be like they're they also could be doing both. They want Zuffa Boxing to be a success, but if it isn't, worst case scenario, they're like, well, we'll make sure that the casual fans don't migrate to boxing, they migrate to UFC.
Yeah, and if they do migrate to boxing, well, we control that now too.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's it in a nutshell. But I feel like all of us, myself and those people that you mentioned, that those insiders that you mentioned that are looking at that, I feel like we all learned that from things that you've taught us along the way by virtue of revealing facts, about their finances and about their modus operandi, their tactics, everything. I feel like you've sort of opened a lot of people's eyes to this. That's why we are finally able to, you should be so proud of yourself that we are arriving at conclusions now that 10 years ago we would have never even thought of. So
yeah, I'm starting my own religion. That's what that's
I'm
exactly
a Nasher.
what I'm doing.
I'm a Nasher.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like Scientology from except from aliens and stuff doing that. I'm slowly leading people along, and then the next step is you guys got to mail me some money to get the true clear, to get karmically aligned properly.
Now, WBC also revealed something similar. They have a $40,000 diamond encrusted necklace that they have revealed, it is as gaudy as you could imagine if you have not seen it. But I got to get your take on that, because that seems pretty extravagant.
This is one of the stupidest fucking things to do at this point right now. That is just not only does it look absurd, but you're being challenged, by this new entity that's coming in that's trying to get legislation passed. And there's a lot of focus now on the sanctioning organizations. What are they doing for their job? And there's a lot of criticism by various boxers, which, a lot of people think these boxers are being pushed perhaps by TKO and stuff to make these claims. But I don't care if they are or not. I've always kind of supported, all through the years, I've always supported when boxers push back against the sanctioning organizations. But, these various boxers now don't want to pay the sanctioning fees. They're complaining about them. And what do you reveal? You claim that you're there for the sport, that the money, you're a nonprofit, the money goes into all these endeavors. Well, what's helped by a $40,000 necklace, right? Are you saying, are you saying that boxers are so, I guess, low class, right? That they would be enamored by having a diamond encrusted necklace that they could, we're going to flash something shiny in front of you and that will distract you. That is enough to get you motivated to work with WBC. Is that what you're saying? Because that 40,000, you imagine, could be put to much better use, on youth boxing, on amateurs, on health and safety, on brain scans, on a pension, some sort of pension. All these other things you could be doing with it, and you're spending it on a diamond encrusted fucking necklace while everybody's paying attention to you, calling you, parasites and useless to the sport. And they want to introduce something that'll basically exile you, destroy your business model, which, that part wouldn't be bad. I think we definitely need some sort of regulation reforming of the sanctioning organizations. But and this is what you do. This is your pushback. This is how you're going to prove the worth of a sanctioning organization. As you can probably tell, I think it's pretty fucking stupid what they did.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Let's talk about Marquel Martin. And for those of you out there that don't remember the name, or you are trying to figure out where you know the name from, Marquel Martin acted in an advisory position to Francis Ngannou and sort of helped him extricate himself from the UFC. He has moved on to getting his NFL agent's license and has had some sharp comments about working in the MMA space. What did you think about his statements?
Well, we should say friend of the show, because I believe
yes,
he was
came on.
I think we did. I think once or twice. I cannot remember exactly if it was once or twice. Oh, once. Yes, once. You interviewed him.
Yep.
So friend of the show. And on that regard, he was. We got to give him a lot of credit for a lot of things, because he was the only manager that saw the sunset clause in a fighter's contract, and he recommended to his fighter that if he wants to take advantage of that. And so that's why Francis Ngannou got a 12 million, I think, fighting Tyson Fury, is my understanding, and 16 million all in for fighting Joshua. It's almost 30 million on 2 fights. And then, close to 10 million for his one PFL fight. So only 3 fights, but still 30 million in 3 fights. Only one other person in MMA out of the UFC can make a claim of making that much in 3 fights. And that's, Conor McGregor, I can't remember right now. That's how long he's been on the sport. So he did that. So you got to give him a lot of credit there. And what he's talking about, on this Substack, he's going to become an NFL agent, and how they have standards and stuff. And he just pointed out the obvious fact that there are no standards in MMA, that you do not need to get a license or anything, that all you need is a fighter to say, you're my manager. And I actually have no problem with that. It's the rest of the stuff that he talked about. It's a big problem, is that you talk about these managers that really don't know what they're doing, sitting across the table from other people that do know what they're doing, and doing nothing to protect their fighters. And according to him, he said some of them did real damage to their fighter with bad contracts, bad advice, and no recourse for the fighter. It's a sport that there's no guardrails, as he talks about. And I think he's 100% right. That's the couple problems with MMA is, one is, as we talked about in MMA, because the market's been captured by the UFC, there's really no benefit to trying to have the promotions compete against each other for your athlete. And as I've mentioned many times, and as James Quinn, the guy that fucking negotiates the CBAs, at least he did for decades, the CBAs for all the players associations, competition is what drives up wages. So you take away that possibility that you cannot drive up wages through competition by getting multiple real bidding going on from multiple promoters, and have to deal with this 800-pound gorilla. Then the managers become technically brokers. They are there to get access to get you into the UFC, to smooth things over. Now, some of them still do stuff for their fighters. Some of them look out, try to get sponsorship. Some of them try to help with their finances. They tried, I think some of them have tried to, they understand the world they live in and have tried to recreate their position as one that still offers benefit to their fighters. But what they don't do is they don't offer.
To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Okay, the face!